Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I am your host, Bill Little. There's always that little delay there because I can never remember to switch the microphone when I finish the previous shows. And I have to bring up the live stream before I can do that, but we did it, so here we go. Hope everybody's doing well, and the crazy just gets stronger and stronger. Let me do a little of this action here and a little bit of that action, and maybe throw in a little bit of that. There we go. And maybe a little bit more of that. So remote control is an amazing thing. So I hope everybody's been well. It's been everybody's saying red shirt. I think this is my first time doing the show in a red shirt. Bill's quite married. You don't have to be cruel. The So anyway, here we are. Once again, just a crazy week, and just spent earlier today. I think I probably spent at least an hour and a half talking about the 9/11 anniversary. I did moving back to America on that, and Tuesday's show got misplaced, so that'll be up too. So we got two of them this week, and then we did both virtue signals on that. So. It's hard to believe. In fact, moving back to America, I basically just talked about how I got here from that day, and I guess we'll see. I was a little worried about the 20th anniversary before we left them an entire military. Somebody said it's the biggest loss of military materiel in the history of the world. I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. So anyway, so there's that. So this world is. We'll start with something I've been thinking about on and off since for at least the last 10 or 15 years. So I'm coming in to do the show. I do the virtue signals at 11:30 here. I get those uploaded and converted and all that stuff. Do the thumbnails, and I generally go home for 3 hours or so. Come back, and I was on my way back tonight, and I'm just playing tunes off of my iPhone, and I was listening to a Bowie tune. It's not my all-time favorite Bowie tune on my phone, but there it was. It's Fashion, and I remember thinking, boy, I kind of miss him. He just seemed to have like such. Every time I ever saw him, he seemed to be just a class act. But then I realized the first time I saw him, it must have been around '74, something like that. I was this was the age of this. This is the sleepover age, and I was sleeping over at a friend's house, and we were staying up real late. It was 11. And it must have been either Midnight Special or Don Kirshner's rock concert, but we were sitting there, and Bowie came out in like this glitzy glam, like almost like butterfly outfit. And he had real thin, and that real round-eyed look, real haunted look of Ziggy Stardust era. And then he started singing, Major Tom, I think it was, which is about an astronaut. And I was sitting there with my friend, and I was looking at this like, what is this? I was really like irate. I was really furious. It really, 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 really just flipped me out. Now I realize now that was what he was going for, and in the intervening years, he turned out to be. He probably was this his whole life, but he certainly seemed to be a class act and a gentleman. And so a lot of what show business people do is designed to provoke that exact reaction. But I'm just using that to tee up something. My wife, Cursor, drat her, is always so much more balanced about things than I am. And anytime I get lathered up about something, she generally plays the other side of the coin, and this lathers me up a little more, and then makes me kind of calm down and think about things. But since I don't have anything else to talk about this time to get us going here, I often think about this. I look at the changes in our society, and I think these are all catastrophic. and 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 I see all the dangers and all of the all of this, and it seems like Gen Z is turning out to be considerably better than millennials in terms of uh, general lower levels of suckage. But when I think about what all this stuff means, I mean, I'm not going to be here for this, and it's so what is it that so upsets me about this? And when I come down to it again and again and again, I keep thinking, what are these people going to do when this stuff hits? What's going to happen when this hits? And that causes me to think about something that I don't know if you guys ever consider or what. I mean, I've considered it, and I've come to the startling conclusion that no, I'm right. But here's the argument. Here's what I feel sometimes. Um, so I realize that every single generation of humans has felt that the generation coming after them is worthless. This is a great line in the Aliens Handbook, which is a fan-made supplement to the movie. The book came out decades ago, and it was a great book, and it had little sections that were written in the parts of like by soldiers and stuff. Um, and and he had a line in there where it's like one of these colonial marines are saying was, look, I know everybody's, he's talking about smart guns or something, and he said every generation of soldier, there's probably some flinty Israelite sergeant, at the walls of Jericho talking about these newfangled horns and everything, and how they would have brought the walls down with axes and things like that. And I thought it's really true. Everybody is, and thank you for that, Mr. Broke College student. Everybody assumes that the things that the next generation aren't doing is going to doom them to a horrible life and weakness and all the rest of it. And there's it's almost like, have you ever heard of the, what is it? It's called the Shepherd's Note. Is it that there's a bizarre. I'm actually going to look for that because this is a really good analogy. So there is a musical tone, and when you listen to it, it sounds like it is constantly decreasing in pitch, but it never stops. And when you think about that, you realize, well, how can that be possible? I'm going to look it up. I'll see if I can find it, and then I'll post it for you. Um, so this is kind of like, this is like the I want to say it's called the Shepherd's Tone. Somebody may know, but anyway, it's this particular. I'm going to look for it. I am, because there's no way to explain it. When I heard about it, I couldn't believe it was true, but by God, it is. Give me a second here, see if I can find it. It's interesting enough to go looking for. I think it's called. Let me see. I'm not going to waste a lot of time in this, but it is an interesting point to make because it kind of talks about the thing I'm trying to get at, and that is that every generation thinks that the generation coming after them, shepherd tone. (501). I'm just going to see if it. Let me. I see how they do it. I see how they do it. So here it is. I'll download it and play it for you guys. I didn't understand how it worked before, but somebody on YouTube, which is, if YouTube would just be what YouTube was supposed to be, like a place for anybody to put videos without editing, and if Facebook would be what Facebook was supposed to be and what it was in the beginning, life would be grand. It'd just be grand. Anyway, take a listen to this because this is actually kind of cool. And I'll just download the audio so that you can get the cheat. There it comes. Download. So when I talk about this idea that every generation has felt like that they've, that the next generation is just doomed because of, why is this not downloading? Download. You know what? Screw it. Here's what I'll do. I will play it in the background as I talk. So this is rather than a descending shepherd tone, this is an increasing shepherd tone. You can listen to this, and you'll get where I'm going with this. An increasing shepherd tone. You can listen to this, and you'll get where I'm going with this. And like that forever. Um, Although the version I heard, it was getting lower. And that was the point I was going for, right? It just doesn't seem like it's possible. You can't just keep saying every generation can't be right about this. You can't be right that everything is just degenerating. And so here's what I had to think about that. Um, that tone was created by taking an increasing tone, which you heard, and then overlaying it an octave apart and doing a gradual dissolve so that over time, all you hear is this continual increase, but you never hear the cut because it's kind of an audio dissolve. Anyway, that's kind of how I feel about this generational thing. It's like, yeah, it sounds like everything's going downward, but it's actually kind of the same curve just being repeated, repeated, repeated. Anyway, here's the point I was trying to make or talk about. What if we're wrong about all of this stuff? And this is the question I ask myself all the time. But what if we're wrong about this? Whenever I talk about millennials and so on with all their screen time and their and all of the fact that that when you take away their devices and you go out in public and you see 6 or 7 people at the same table, and instead of talking, they're all looking at their devices and phones and all of this. What if all of this is actually good? Because I look at it and I see it's catastrophe waiting to happen, and this is the reason why we do what we do. But what if we're wrong about that? Well, what if we're wrong about all the socialism stuff? When I say wrong, I don't mean about what if we're wrong about it historically, but what if this is what people are evolving into and what they want? What if? It's always good to ask these questions. You'll be relieved to know it didn't end here, but this is kind of what critical thinking is all about. What if I'm just one of these old guys, old man shaking fist at cloud, it's because things aren't the way we used to ride bicycles and we used to get dirty and okay, grandma, or okay, boomer. So where I'm going with this is are we any different than every generation that's come before us? And I have to say, yes, I think this is different. And I think it's different for a number of reasons. Somebody in the comments, Marisha, in the comment section was making my point exactly. They were saying that Elvis Presley was just, unspeakably vile, and that he was going to destroy America. Well, maybe he did. Because Elvis's hip gyrations got a lot of people worked up. Now, if you look at Elvis now and you compare him to the stuff that's on the music scene today, it sounds like the Mormon Tabernacle Choir in terms of its wholesomeness. So, is this thing actually going down, or is it a version of the shepherd's tone where it just appears to be going down? There's no question. We're in strange territory here, and we are in ahistoric territory. We're now, as a society, we are someplace where human beings have never been before, and this is what gets me so concerned. Obviously, I'm a big student of history, and the reason I'm a student of history is because we can learn a lot from history. In fact, we can learn pretty much everything we need to learn from history. But humans have never been here before. They've never had the hive mind before. So we, what do we do about that? Is this actually worse, or does it just appear to be worse to us? And I think where I come down to this is, yes, it is significantly different. First of all, it assumes that nothing can go wrong. Let's just say for some reason that they're right, and we stop poking the hornet's nest, and then everybody leaves us alone. I don't believe this for a split second, but let's grant the case. And we all have one world government, and everything's cool, and nobody's fighting anyone. Just say just say that's true. I don't believe it for an instant. Sooner or later, another one of these solar flare events is going to happen, and the electricity is going to go out. And what happens then? This is the first time in history that a generation has IQ scores that are lower than its predecessor. First time ever that we've ever since we've been measuring IQ across the board. This is the first time that average IQ scores have gone down, ever. That's significant. We have never had a society that is connected in a non-emotional way, which may sound like an odd thing to say about the internet with all of the internet shrieking that's going on out there, but that's actually kind of the point. The reason the level of discourse on the internet is as vile as it is because it's anonymous. And people, I've said this many times, people will say things about you and to you on the internet that they would never say to your face. One of the reasons they'd never say it to your face is because some of the things they say, they wouldn't have a face anymore. The other reason is because since we're separated and we're not in the same room and we're not connecting face to face, literally face to face, people assume the worst about you. They don't get to see that you're an actual person. You're just a talking head. This is all there is of me. There's just nobody knows if I have legs or not since the last afterburner. So what happens if all this stuff goes away? I mean, when I look at all of these device usages, I say to myself, well, what happens if this goes away? Even if it goes away for a while, and for a while I mean months or a year or two, what are they going to do? I suppose what would happen is that they would eventually, get over it. That they would go through a couple of weeks of whining and complaining, just like we will, and then the ones that can't take it are going to just walk off a bridge, and the other ones are going to adapt and all that stuff. And all of this is in a weird way encouraging. I know this is not making a whole lot of sense. I'm just kind of trying to figure it out. So, but there are people out there that are not so isolated from reality that they believe this stuff. And there are people out there who want the stuff that we've earned, that we worked for. And those people are making it extremely clear that they are trying to destroy everything we believe in order to get to where they want to be. Marusha Dark, who's just turning into one of the most MVPs ever, mentions Brian Seltzer. What a perfect choice. Is it Stetzer? Seltzer? You know the guy. I look at him, and I mean, he doesn't have to say anything. He makes my skin crawl. He really just does. Brian Setzer makes what you know the guy. He makes me uncomfortable. Brian Stelter, okay. And he makes me most uncomfortable when he does that soy smile that. I'm not showing enough teeth. See, you know this. I can't do it. Thank God, I can't do it. And he's so soft, and he's so arrogant, and so sure of himself. All of this stuff. Not Brian Seltzer. Not the guy from Stray Cats. He's walking cool. And the whole world seems to be kind of heading in that direction. And so it's important sometimes to ask yourself, so what if that's we're becoming Eloy. And what's wrong with that? Well, that's kind of it. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the classics, and most of you, of course, know what I'm talking about immediately because we have a highly educated audience here, despite the host. Oh, man. Sage Grouch wins the internet for tonight. He said Brian's smile is like the smile from the mouth of Sauron in Lord of the Rings. Now that's only is that only on the limited edition? Hang on, this one's a still. I can do this. I can do this quickly. It's absolutely true. Hang on, this will be worth the wait. Yeah, yeah. Hang on, we're getting there. That's really that's there. It is perfect. Uh, Yeah, this is what the Brian smile reminds me of. Well played. Here, I'll look at this. Not me, you idiot. Come on, you. Don't play this game with me, computer. There we go. Check this out. I should do the whole show like this. I should chroma key myself in and just do the mouth of Sauron. But that's actually the expression, you know. That's actually it. All the teeth, mouth clenched. Not a smile that I would consider to be like an authentic smile. Just weird. And yeah, so well, that was just classic. Sauron has better teeth. No, that was low. So all right. So what am I getting at here? So what if all of this stuff is the stuff that's happening? What if it happens and continues to happen that way? What happens? Well, I don't think that there are people out there that are going to leave these man children alone, and that's probably the heart of where I'm going. Ultimately, in fact, that is the heart of where I'm going. Um, the destruction of masculinity as we understand it. And Brian is the poster child of this. What's wrong with that? Well, it's it first of all it assumes that there are no other real men out there and that everybody's going to turn into a man baby. And that's just not true. And so if you are going to maintain a society where you can be a man baby, you better have non-man babies in there. And this is the great irony of our times. This is the absolute number one irony of being alive today. We are fighting this overwhelming tide in the pop culture that is going to destroy progressives. This is the thing that I never ever cease to be amazed of. If all of this stuff goes south, we will be the ones who will deal with this, not them. We're trying to prevent the societal collapse because they're the ones who are going to suffer. I mean, we don't want it to collapse we have our own reasons for not wanting it to collapse, obviously, but ultimately, this is it. And to say that this is always going to be this way is just plain nuts. You really have to get to this idea of mental toughness. And physical toughness doesn't hurt either, but mental toughness. And this is where I'm going with this, because I live in a state now where the entire Gavin Newsom incompetence and arrogance and French laundry thing has been utterly, completely subsumed by his advertising campaign, which is extremely not effective, pervasive. It's everywhere. And the ads are all the same, and it has been for months now. And it's a tribute to Larry Elder and everything we believe. But the ads in California that are running all the time now are basically this. Don't, first of all, vote no against the Republican power grab. It's a power grab. It's not the way the government's structured. You can argue that it's a bad way to do it, and it is, but we didn't design it. Don't allow the Republican power grab, these ads say. The leading Republican candidate, and then they show a picture of Larry Elder next to Donald Trump, has committed to removing the mask mandate on his first day in office. And there's Larry Elder's tweet. says, if elected governor, I swear that on my first day in office, I will eliminate the mask mandate in California. And basically, the tone of these ads are, this crazed lunatic is this crazed lunatic is coming here, and he's trying to kill us all by making us take off our masks. And there's like, I'm not making you, but the mask. Governor Newsom is working to keep Californians safe. Okay, so that's what we get now. It's a fear campaign. It's an appeal to the Karens and the Bryans, to the soy boys, and to the furious, what's the word? The term that Doomcock uses that I love some, or it's probably a drinker. Independent, powerful women, all this stuff. So it's an appeal to fear, and there's a lot of cowards in this state, and so what do we do about that? Well, now a broke college student who's making a relatively new appearance anywhere has already had a couple things to say. He said, Bill, you forget the one good thing about the mask. It's an identifier for the Karens. Better know who the enemy of freedom is. Yes, but I'm not a Karen, and I'm required by law to wear these things. So they put the whole thing up as a mask mandate. And if Gavin Newsom wins, and I have no confidence that if he wins, that meant he actually won. That's a whole other issue. Then they're basically, people are saying we are voting to become Eloy. We are Eloy, and we want to be. And that's where I got off the rails a second ago, as usual. H.G. Wells' classic novel, The Time Machine, talks about a future where he goes tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years in the future, and the human race is bifurcated along the class lines that existed when he wrote the story. He wrote the story in the late 1800s, I think, maybe early 1900s, in Britain, where you had an aristocratic upper class, which was already getting to be a bit foppish, a little bit dainty, and then you had the working men in the coal mines. And he basically said, okay, so one of these branches is going to turn into these beautiful, happy, smiley people. And that's one thing you can say about this current generation of millennials, is they are some good-looking people. I just never, ever, well, the women are anyway. And when you look at like high schoolers from like 1904, these people look like they're in their 40s. So okay, so you've got these Eloy, and those of us who take the part of the character, the main character in The Time Machine, we are kind of like the present day people looking at this awful future where everybody's so soft, and we think, my God, it's a nightmare. But is it? It turns out it is, I think. The Morlocks eat the Eloy. They provide them with all this lovely food, and they make their life absolutely incredible. And being an Eloy is like being cattle. You are protected. There's no predators. Food just magically appears overnight, and you get to spend the whole day in the sun, and you get to write poetry, and you get to follow your passion and all the rest of it. And then comes a siren, and you march in, and then you become dinner. But the scene that bothered me the most, they made a remake of The Time Machine. Don't even. The classic. With Rod, what's his name? The original Time Machine movie, there's a scene in there, and I suppose it's in the book too. And the scene that scares me the most about that is when he first encounters the Eloy. Here are these beautiful people in these kind of, Logan's Run kind of, robes and gowns and stuff. But Rod Taylor. But one of them falls into the river and is drowning. And all of the others just sit there and watch. Now, this movie was made back in the late 50s, early 60s. Because if they made that movie today, somebody would be in there drowning, and everybody would stand around and watch. But instead of standing around and watching, they'd watch like this. This is how they would watch people drown. They would just sit there on the riverbank and just do this. Just watch them go under, just like that. And it's the exact same thing. And this is what makes the hero guy makes Rod Taylor lose his mind. So what's the matter with you people? What is the matter with you? And he goes in and rescues this girl and so on. Yeah, Reagan would save the drowning. Wizard 13 points out Reagan's last life-saving feat was as governor. He was a lifeguard and saved dozens of lives, I think. And, when he was governor, he was at the mansion out back at an event, and he noticed that somebody was missing. This story just worth the effort. He's basically looking around, and he realizes something's wrong, and somebody's missing. And it turned out that a couple of kids had gone to, early teenagers, had gone to the pool and were trying to get on a raft or something, and one of them missed, and she couldn't swim. She went right down to the bottom. Black girl, as I remember. And Reagan, in his suit and tie, dives in there and saves yet another one. That's almost scripted. So this is what concerns me about this softness. Is I'm playing with ideas to get to the heart of things. This is what I do. So let's just say this whole idea about liberty and freedom and all the stuff that we believe in, and I still believe in it. I still consider these to be sacred ideas. But for the sake of the argument, let's just say that's you're talking about the good old days when we wore whalebone corsets, old man, and drove around in carts. These newfangled automobiles, or I get all that. But it is becoming clear to me that the ability to defend themselves, not even against enemies, although enemies are a part of it, but to defend themselves against life, is becoming weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. They just are losing a kind of emotional and spiritual immunity. And that immunity comes the way that other immunities come, but certainly before the age of vaccinations, real vaccines. You would get sick, and if you survived, you wouldn't get sick again. Your body's developed immunity against that particular disease, and on you go. And these people are being protected so much against everything that they have no immunity. And this is fine as long as you live in the plastic bubble with no germs in it, but that bubble can't last, and there is the argument. There it is. So, what does that mean? Yeah, that's exactly right. Babyface Nelson 12. The newer, softer future will be great as long as nothing unexpected or dangerous ever happens, ever. Perfect. Couldn't have put it better. Absolutely. I've spent half an hour walking around, and that's exactly what I'm basically trying to say. As long as nothing bad happens. This is the entire argument. You can make the case that this is just old man shakes fist at cloud on my part and our part, as long as everything continues as smoothly as it has. And it's not going to. It's not going to. It can't. And this is the curse not only of our age, but this is the curse of humanity. Strong men make good times. And when you're in the middle of good times, you think the good times are you think that's the environment. That's the resting state of nature is security, electricity, health, 24-hour entertainment. That's just how the world is. Well, the people who made that world possible are nothing like you. And because you become a product, a beneficiary of their efforts, and because you don't recognize it, now you are going to create a world where everything is going to be horrible. And things are going to come crashing down, they're going to come crashing down hard. And that's going to make life for your children or grandchildren exceedingly unpleasant. And that will make the kind of people who will eventually make things good again, and round and round and round we go, and there's no escaping this cycle, because if we could, we would have. It doesn't affect everybody, because not everybody is quite that selfish or that stupid. I came in this morning and to do the Moving Back to America, and I didn't have anything. I just could not think of anything to say about anything. And as I got in the chair, I realized, 20 years of 9/11, maybe that'd be something worth talking about. But one of the things I was going to talk about was this idea of privilege. So stay with me here. My mom's side of the family is certainly not aristocracy by any means, but my grandfather was awarded the Order of the British Empire, so there's kind of there's just kind of a, knight errant kind of thing there. I didn't know anything really about my dad's line of the family until 15, 20 years ago when my cousin Jack decided to look him up. And it turns out that we Whittles of the White Hill region in Lancashire are nothing but mill workers, and before that we were coal miners, and I mean generations of them, because he's got it down to 1726. Every single one of them, every single one of my ancestors, there's the seventh of 11 children is the father of, and just all the way down. And I've seen pictures of coal miners, and I've heard descriptions of coal miners, and one of the descriptions that I heard was that British coal miners had like these black marks all the way down their spine because they were in mines that were so low that they were scratching their back up against the roof of the coal, and the coal would get into cuts on your face, chipping away at these razor sharp pieces of flint, and they strike you in the face, and the coal dust gets into that cut, and then it heals over, and it's like a tattoo. So it wasn't a happy life up there in Wigham. In fact, George Orwell wrote a book called The Road to Wigham Pier, and it was all about working class miners and so on. So I come from the lowest of the low. And at first, that was a bit of a surprise for me. And that lasted for an hour, maybe. And then as time went on, I mean, like later that day, I began to realize, no, exactly the opposite. That's not only not something to be ashamed of, it's something to be proud of. It's something to be proud of. And I realized the sacrifices that have been made to get me here in this chair. We were just coal miners back as far as history goes. We were coal miners under the ground in miserable, deadly conditions, probably died at age 35 of black lung disease, for as far back as we go, living underground like the Morlocks. And there's a British aristocracy up there, and they're living like the Eloi. And we're down. I'm descended from Morlocks. I mean, really Morlocks, like under the earth, filthy creatures. That's where I come from. And my family history looks like this. It's like coal miner, coal miner, coal miner, coal miner, coal miner, coal miner. It's nothing but the baseline of descent from the region that I happen to come from. And then as time goes by, there's like a little jump, little tiny one, and we go from being coal miners to mill workers. If you've ever seen or heard of those horrific stories of small 6-year-old, 5-year-old children working in textile mills, losing fingers to these giant machines, that's us. And so we were mill workers for 7 generations or something like that. And then another little uptick. I want to say we were a plumber for a generation or 2. And then something miraculous happened. So the whole timeline is like, here we go, little tiny uptick there, here we go, little tiny uptick. And then all of a sudden right here, something happens. And then the thing just does this. And what happens here is my family moves to America. My grandfather went from being a son of a plumber to becoming a guy on the bleeding edge of technology in America. We got here in 1915, which is significantly past the abolition of slavery, but that's not going to bother them. And parenthetically, it doesn't matter if my father was the greatest slave. My father could have been Nathan Bedford Forrest for all I know, or care. I do know, as it turns out. But if he had been Nathan Bedford Forrest, I wouldn't be responsible for his actions, and I wouldn't feel guilty about them either. Anyway, so we continue with this, and so he's a phone lineman. He's installing telephone lines. He meets my grandmother, who's a telephone operator, and was till the day she died. I stayed with her as a little boy, and the phone would ring, and it would ring and ring and ring. 2:00 in the morning, ring, ring, and I'd hear my grandmother get up and go down the stairs, ring, ring, ring. She was the telephone operator for Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, out of her house. So we go from coal miner, textile worker, little stint as plumber, and then all of a sudden, hey, look at this, we're telephone linemen, and then we're a hotel manager, and now we're an internet pundit. My grandfather was a writer wanted to be a writer. He wasn't a writer. He was a telephone lineman, but he wanted to be a writer. And he couldn't be a writer because he had a family of 7, 8 to support, something like that. And so now I get to be a writer because he denied himself the ability to be a writer. And this is kind of the thing I mean when I talk about learning from the past. I don't take any of this stuff for granted anymore, and I just don't. And I understand the sacrifices. My grandfather sacrificed what he wanted to do for his entire life in order to let his son Bill, my dad, become a hotel manager. My dad got to be a hotel manager because he went to the hotel school on the GI Bill after signing up for World War II and expecting to get killed in Germany, and on we go. So when we talk about privilege, I realize no, I am privileged. I really am, and my privilege is I never had anybody tell me that I could blame what happened to me on anybody else. That's my privilege. I've never had an excuse given to me, and there have been times when I really wanted one that I never had. And the more I learn about my family, the less of an excuse I have, and that's really it. I've never been a victim because I've never thought like a victim, and we come from the Morleyest of the Morlocks, and we managed over the course of generations to pull ourselves up to this spectacular lifestyle you see here. And I'm not joking about that. I know it sounds flip, but I'm serious. Political Animal 87 says it got 6 generations of farmers on the family farm. My generation is the first not to be born on that farm. Right, exactly. And there are boomers, or certainly people in the greatest generation who are the first generation to go to school, and not just college, like high school. So all of this stuff is like building and growing and increasing, and people are grateful, and people are getting better. Dave Big Booty again, coming from the Morlocks. Luxury. Now that's Yorkshiremen. We're Lancashiremen. And so I appreciate it. So I'm not one of these people that falls into this trap of thinking that this is the way life is. And somewhere along the line, I actually developed some physical courage. I don't know how. I was a chicken when I was a kid, a teenager anyway. But now it's like I just face reality. And when I was flying, I realized I'm taking a risk. But risk was worth the reward. Minimize the risk by being very, very careful. Okay. And then all of this to say that all of the things that made me so grateful and so aware of things and be able to do such amazing things are gone now. And I feel sorry for the people that have to grow up in a world where these kind of things are not possible because they're just not spoken about. They're actively discouraged. When I say things like, you know, we would go on road trips with my friends in a car. Is that a guy talking about the good old days, when we had before the internal combustion engine? No, because it's not about the car ride. It's about the independence of it. When you're 16 years old in America, at a certain age anyway, you could get in a car with friends and just drive for 3 days if you felt like taking a look at the telescopes in Kitt Peak Observatory in Arizona, and you're in Miami, Florida. You just get in your car and go. And that initiative and that sense of camaraderie and that sense of we're real friends because we're in a what was it? It was the worst car ever. Was it a Maverick? I think. Yeah. Most uncomfortable car in the world. You couldn't drive that car out of the driveway without starting to have your butt hurt. But you know what I'm saying? So when I get all lathered up about this, it's not because I hate these people. On the contrary, it's because I care about them and I feel sorry for them, and I think that that this is denying them something that's part of joy. And when you hear people who talk about they don't want to work, they just want to get government checks so they can follow their dreams. Following their dreams means playing video games. For my generation, it meant, if you're not working, then I'll stay home and I'll study to become a this or that. No, you won't. You'll stay home and you'll watch the WKRP in Cincinnati marathon. That's how it works. So I'm very concerned about all of this stuff because while things continue to be good, at least materially, it's the spiritual fall first and then the material fall. While things continue to be good materially, I look at most of the younger people out there, and I realize they're missing a lot of life that they should be enjoying. Not because it's old fashioned, but because it's eternal. You know, having genuine friends who you can stay up all night talking to in the flesh. I just don't think I just don't see it out there. And allowing entire society to become a society of Eloi is setting them up for the day when the Morlocks come. And and I realize I was born um, in a real golden age. In fact, I have to say I think I was probably I just don't see how it would be possible to be born at a better time than I was. We didn't have an internet, and we didn't even have remote controls on our black and white TVs when I was born. But we did have a sense of wonder and a sense of optimism about a future that was getting better and better and better. And for years now, uh, it the future doesn't look better; it looks worse. And I'm alarmed about that. And so I kind of come full circle, you know. When I say, geez, look at these people. There's four of them, four young people at a table. And every single one of them is massively overweight. They're going to pay for that. They're going to pay for it. They're paying for it now. Not only are they not going to live as long. You've seen old men, but you've never seen old fat men. You've never seen a fat old man in your life. I never have. They don't make it. Um, so there's that, and it hurts them now too because physical activity is a kind of a real pleasure. Not anymore. I'm 62. I can remember back when I had cartilage in my knees. But when you're young, running around riding a bike, it feels good. Feels good. They don't get that, um, and there's so much that they're missing, and it's going to get worse. I think for them. So this is why, after all of this, I just keep trying to point this out to to say yes, I understand. I think I can sum up my entire uh, feeling about this in one very very simple little small anecdote. I was talking about this once or somewhere at a college back when I used to do colleges, and when I talked about how poorly educated people are and how and all of this, somebody said completely seriously, they said, "But look, whatever information we need, we can just simply get. We'll just ask Siri. We don't need to know the things because we can have access to them all the time. And let's just say that the internet stays up and all that. That's a legitimate answer to this question, to this problem. But I said to this person, I said the problem is not that you can't find the answers. The problem is you don't know what questions to ask. And that's really what it comes down to. Your world has become so narrow, you don't realize what you're missing. Have you seen the Mark Dice man on the street interviews? Well, man on the street interviews in Santa Monica on the beach at Santa Monica, where he asks people, "Who is our nation's capital named after?" And no, well, he's editing obviously, but again and again and again, no, I don't know. And the only people that do know were the pair of tourists visiting from Italy. So I just, like I said, sometimes I just feel like I have to just check my beliefs and just, what if I'm wrong? This is what intellectual honesty is all about. And and I don't think that we should become Eloy. And I think that Rod Taylor is exactly where we should be. I think that's the perfect pitch. Right? If you saw the original Time Machine movie, he's the perfect pitch. He's a scientist. He's smart. He's compassionate, and at the same time, he's ready to go down into the Morlock, hive and kick some ass. Uh, and he's this balance, because that's it. There's a Star Trek episode about that. Uh, and I'm embarrassed. I'm always embarrassed when I talk about original Star Trek now because I used to know the names of these episodes secondhand. I could tell you what episode it was in what season. But it was the episode where there's like a transporter malfunction, I think. Yeah, and Kirk kind of splits into two, and one of them is just like weak Kirk, and he needs this kind of he needs his strength back, and that's it. There's that balance. So it was not the Cloud Minders. The Cloud Minders worst after Spock's brain, the worst episode ever. And it wasn't Mirror Mirror. Enemy Within. Thank you. Yeah, you take Kirk, who's a whole person, and you peel away all of his compassion, and all of his sensitivity, and all of his concern, and all of his worry, and all of his good stuff, and you take evil Kirk and you just split him off, and you think, okay, good Kirk would be a much better guy because now he's lost all the evil stuff. No, no, he can't function. He needs the dark side. He needs the strength, and he needs the ability to go out and fire the phasers. So that's it, I guess. Uh, I remember, like I said, I was listening to David Bowie on the way in, and I remember thinking, oh, Bowie, I love Bowie. No, you didn't always love Bowie. There was a time when you thought Bowie was the end of the world, and I'm beginning to think that that's, pretty much true. Um, so, balance and this culture that I grew up in is was as balanced as anything I've ever seen in history. It's a fundamentally decent society that was strong and able to look out after itself, but wasn't going around smashing people. It wasn't Nazi Germany, wasn't Imperial Japan, and at the same time, it wasn't, you know, Neville Chamberlain and all the rest of them. So there you go. Oh, I should close this session by pointing out that Roy Hamill says everybody wanted a date with Yeoman Rand. You're damn right. Uh, yeah, you're absolutely right. Never particularly liked her hair, but it was sure memorable. Grace Lee Whitney she was something. Um, all right, anyway, so that's that. It's always fun to hear feedback on these things, and but that's basically where I'm going with this. Hang on a second, let me see one thing here. Here's a comment. A broke college student has just come out of nowhere, and he's just making such great points here in the comment section. He says, how much of this do you think is a lack of shame? Do people not feel bad about being less than they could be and should be? That's a great point, man. And I don't even think it's lack of shame, to be honest with you, pal. I think it's lack of knowledge. I really don't think they know what they're missing. And and I don't know what else to put it. Uh, I just don't think they know what they're missing. And this is why I keep trying to make the case as hard as I do. It's just like, there's so much more to this. You know? If you really, really want, you know, retinal display graphics and 190 frames a second all the time, then when you go down the Grand Canyon, put the phone down. You'd be amazed at the graphics quality of actually like riding a raft down the Grand Canyon or it's incredible. It's fully 3D. It's completely immersive experience. The sound, audio, the picture, everything. And the graphics are mind blowing. You can't see the pixels. There's no lag. You don't get any kind of strobing effects. It's astonishing. The 3D is incredible too, by the way. And so Shelby says no buffering. There's no ping. It's just it's just astonishing. And I just suddenly realized, being flip about something, I've just made an argument that I really should be making all the time. It's really that this is the way to reach people about this. This is how you reach people. Yes, you want to experience what it's like to to ride a motorcycle, or you want to do this or fly an airplane. You're on Flight Simulator. Yes, the new Flight Simulator, the new Microsoft Flight Simulator is unbelievable. It's absolutely amazing. It's by far below the flying experience that I've had, because I've had, what's the resolution of the human eye? Is it 8K maybe? Yeah, I've had 8K at 200 frames a second, full 3D, completely immersive. All the dials and knobs all work. All of that. And if you say, well, this allows you to go to worlds that you couldn't go to otherwise, that I will grant you. And therein lies the problem. There's no adventure in this society. There's no place to go. There's no adventure. There's no exploration. There's no place where you have to live by your wits. There's no place where you're allowed to live by your wits more and more often. You can't actually do anything. And Roy says the real problem is that there are consequences in real life. And Marisha says there's no risk of actual death or injury. And I'm getting to the point where this is the fifth or sixth time I said we're about to close this issue, so we're getting there. This is the point. I have once or twice when I was back when I had free time. There was a brief period when I was playing a fair amount of online video games, playing Counter-Strike and something that came before that, Team Fortress, I think, with mods on it. So I've played a fair amount of video games, and I've played a fair amount. I played Black Hawk Down a lot, I remember, against other players. And what I learned about this is that respawning takes all of the, what's the word I'm looking for? Stakes out. If you were to play, any of you out there playing an online game or something, Arma's great, or Player Unknown. If you play that game and you play it with no respawn, and you play it so that if you're killed, you not only have to sit out the round, for the next 15, 20 minutes. If you're killed, you have to watch for the rest of the night. You don't get to play it all again ever that night. If you were to do that, and I've seen it done rarely, then you watch how people play that game, and they don't play that game the way they play the game when you can respawn. They don't we're going to run over and take this building. They don't go, no, they get down low and they crawl along and so on. And that's really kind of it. It's like, this is the kind of sense of reality that's developed now, is that this is a respawn reality where it's like, if I don't like it, I'll just respawn. I'll just suicide out and respawn. Done that more times than I can count. But that's not how life works. And if you spend more and more time in a world with respawn, it's going to make you less and less able to deal with the real world where these things are not available. I would just challenge anybody out there who might be watching this who's younger and think, another old man shakes fist at cloud episode. Play your favorite game, and even if you can't get other people to do it, play it in such a way so that that if you're killed, you're done for the night. You're out. And what I found is that everybody hates campers, but if there's no respawn, then everybody becomes a camper. Yeah, everybody's a camper when there's no respawn. Everybody is finding a nice, relatively safe place to hide, and they're looking around and they're planning their moves, and that's what it's all about. So anyway, that's the end of this particular rant. I played, by the way, parenthetically, I never played Airsoft. It looks kind of cool. But I did play paintball, quite a bit of paintball. And I don't know if this is true for Airsoft. It looks like it's not true, but I haven't played it, so I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing about paintball. Paintball feels real because if you get hit by a paintball, that effing hurts. That really, really hurts. And since it hurts, you don't want to get hit by a paintball. I was playing paintball once, and there was like it was capture the flag as it usually was, and there was kind of like a little, what do you want to call it, like a little readout. A couple of sandbags kind of in a U-shaped position, kind of so you could cover the field, the flags behind you, so you're kind of like forward observation post and defense. and we're running close to the end of the game, and about 2 minutes left in the game, and all of a sudden, something like 15 enemy players come charging this thing, and I'm behind cover. So I start playing, pow pow pow, and I get off a couple rounds, and all of a sudden, all of the sandbags around me are just exploding in color because these guys are just, it's like 15 guys just putting fire on me, and instead of me bravely standing up and going Rambo, I put my face into the dirt, and if I could have chewed my way out of that, I would have. And I knew it was going to kill me, and I did it. And anyway, you just can't help it. You just duck. You get down. Needless to say, one of them comes around and just pops me on the back, and that's the end of that. First time I ever played paintball, by the way, I had a helmet liner, World War II helmet liner. They look like the helmets. They're just not made out of steel. They're made out of hard kind of fiberglass plastic. And I had the rental gun, which was, you fire it and you'd watch the ball roll down the barrel and go about 4 feet and fall on the ground. It was just pathetic. It was awful. And I was behind this tree, and I knew there were some people out there, and I was trying to get a shot, and they're behind me, and I've got this tree, and I had goggles on, and I had this liner on. So I'm like peering around the tree, and all of a sudden I hear this thwack. So I put my hand up, and I go back and sit. And I take this liner off, and there's a red streak like right here, just like right there. And I looked at that paintball smear, and I said, man, I am so grateful to the people who went out there and did this for real so that I can take off my helmet and look at this thing and go out and do it again. Because that red smear there was, in any other generation, that was the end of me. In a messy kind of way. It was like instantaneous headshot. You're dead and gone. You're not coming back. You don't get to respawn. You don't get to reboot. Nothing. You're game over. It's game over, man. Game over. And that's really all I'm asking, I think. And I think that's all it takes to avoid this endless cycle, is to have people go out there and realize that red paint smear on this helmet liner was real for thousands, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of young men just peeked around the corner of that tree, and that's it, lights out, gone. And there you go. So that's something to think about. Mobile Moto says China may give us the opportunity to experience that sooner rather than later. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I don't know where. I'm not in any hurry to get into a land war in Asia, but I still believe this is true, and I've never given this up. If this country is invaded, the army will not be able to fire on them because the citizens will get there before the army. There'll be nothing left for the army to do but clean up the bodies. I mean, if you heard people were coming ashore, in San Diego, and we're waiting army unit. No, it's okay. You can just tell them to relax. We got this. There'd be people. There'd be 17 of us in a van, on our, the best line I ever heard about this, I wish it was mine, it wasn't, but if that ever really happened, we wouldn't have a chance to reload. Yeah, so there's that. Anyway, okay, so let's go over to buildle.com here and see what we have. It looks like our forums are back, and that's nice. Break after a while. We're still trying to get that bugged out, so we'll take a look at those, and then we will if we have time, we'll go to Facebook afterwards. Should I become a member? I will. I'm logging in. There's the guy who runs the site. Good looking guy. Shows members. Before. Stratosphere launch questions and more. Here we go. 090921. Post your questions for Bill Whittle's live stream of the Stratosphere Lounge, and it's good to be back with us. So let's click on that link. Why don't we? All right, here we go. I'm just scanning. We got a couple of Harry Lumleys. Three Harry Lumleys. Yeah, there's a couple of Marushas, another Harry Lumley, and then there's a Marusha, and then there's a Harry Lumley, and then there's a Troy Stevens just to break things up, and a Clay Bradley. Hey, Clay. All right, let's do them. The first one from Henry Lumley is in bold caps. Bill, this is not a question. Okay. I can't wait to find out what it is. Let me reposition some things here so I can read this. Too much difficulty here. Yeah, come on. All right. Hey, post your questions for Bill this week's Stratosphere Lunch. This topic is unofficial, so Bill and the team is not required to read any of these questions. So ask good ones if Bill does. Proofread your question, make it easy for Bill. Thank you. I appreciate the work. I genuinely do on keeping this thing groomed here, guys. Bill, if you read this, can you give the community a hint for the theme of the night? Politics, science fiction, the colonies, or pop culture? A post in a forum or mentioned during backstage would be appreciated. We would prefer to ask questions that stay on the theme and do not contribute to the total derailment of your thought train. Thank you, Henry. That's not only is that question extremely gracious, but your efforts and your work in the forums and all of it is deeply appreciated. I really mean it. I don't know about theme shows. I really like theme shows. My only problem is I've only got like two themes. I got a space theme and I've got an entertainment theme. I actually thought about that on the way in, thinking, well, what? Maybe the thing to do is to post theme ideas, and we just take a poll or list a couple of good ones, and we'll just knock them down one week after the other. This is going to be our Shakespeare night, and this is going to be. I wouldn't mind doing a Shakespeare night. In fact, I'd really like to do a Shakespeare night. So thank you for that. Moving down. Here's Henry again. It says, Bill, can you guys please do another SpaceX video like the ones you recorded during the Falcon Heavy test launch? This baby's going to fly soon. There's a number of pictures of the Starship stacked. So please capture it live if possible. Your Falcon Heavy video is one of my favorite pieces of content you guys ever put out. It still gives me chills every time I watch it. That is an excellent, excellent idea. Excellent idea. So yes, when the Starship flies, we will do that live. At least I will. And I just did, if you haven't seen it, called Mechazilla. Not only is Musk amazing in terms of what he's building, but he says he can turn the thing around in an hour. He's going to fly the Starship 3 times a day. So yes, that's a great idea. And when they have that launch, I will be covering it live. That's a promise, unless I'm, incapacitated. But yes, we will definitely cover that live. And if we can get Scott and Steve on there too, we will definitely do that, because the launch of that thing, it's incredible. It looks so retro. I made that point at the end of the Mechazilla episode on SpaceX. The Starship, I actually don't like the way it looks, and I don't like the way it looks because it looks fake to me, and it looks fake to me because it looks like Destination Moon. Who would have thought it? I don't know. I kind of grew up with modules, and I kind of like modules. I would prefer modules. And here's this metallic silver thing that lands on his tail. It's just like Tintin. And by the way, I noticed that Elon Musk has a Tintin rocket on his desk. But yeah, this is Musk by himself is almost by himself making the future that I thought I was going to get happen. All of it. So yes, we will definitely do it live, and it's great. Moving on. So yes, we will do that. Here's Henry Lumley again. Hey Bill, you seem to put together a string of guest spots on very different podcasts. What changed? Did you start asking people, or did your work start getting more attention recently? Do you have any more guest spots coming up that we don't know about yet? Is there a particular podcast or guest spot that you see as a goal, one you're trying to wish you could get on? Yes, part of that was here in Stratosphere Lounge 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, maybe a little less. I got shamed into it. By the way, the first person I contacted was Overlord DVD, Dictor Van Doomcock. And we've been in email communication for the last 3 or 4 weeks. He's had a lot going on lately. We were going to shoot something Tuesday night, but I had something I couldn't get out at Tuesday night, and so we'll do something next week. He's been going through a little rough patch, I think. Um, and I said, hey, see, he had to postpone it a couple times, and then I postponed it once. And I said, the main thing is, buddy, we just have fun with this. We'll get to it when we get to it. But it looks like it'll probably be Tuesday night. I don't know whether he's going to do that live or not. I'll let you know. But that was great. The Mike Rowe thing was just enormous fun. And parenthetically, his producer has sent me an email, which he didn't have to send. This is 4 or 5 days after it was over, saying the feedback we're getting on that episode is incredible. These are Mike's fans. Oh, it's the best episode ever, and can't wait to do it and have me back. So, yeah, it looks like I'll be doing some more stuff with Mike, and that's great because I really want to work with Mike Rowe on entertainment related stuff. And then I did the Babylon Bee podcast tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific to 5:20 Pacific time. I've got a Newsmax hit with Carl Higbee, who's a fan, and he's trying to work me in. So we're trying to get out a little more. When people say you should be on Fox, I've actually been on Fox 5 times, and I can't believe it was 5 times. But the 5 times were 5 times on Red Eye, and then Greg stopped doing Red Eye, and he did the 5 for forever, and now he's doing late night again, and I need to get in touch with him and get back on that show. Now, you never know when somebody's just being nice to you, but you can often tell when somebody says something that they don't have to say. The producer of the Mike Rowe show was very kind the whole way through, and that's just professional courtesy. But to send me clips of the comments that they were getting 5 days after it aired, that's above and beyond. And when I did the last Red Eye, it was the only time we had a chance to go out and have a drink afterwards, and he said, Greg said, Bill, if you lived in New York, I'd have you on every week. I said, that's very nice of you. Thank you. Yeah, and we recorded, I want to say we recorded at 8:30. I want to say somewhere around there, 8:30. So I would fly to New York the night before. Was it the night before? Usually, just to play it safe. And then somewhere around noon or 2 o'clock, the producers would say, give us some ideas about some of the things you want to talk about. So I'd just give them some ideas. And then we'd go in at 8 or so, and we'd record it live to tape. And a Red Eye was taken away from him. That's surprising and not cool. And then we just go in there and just do the show. And very few pauses. Live to tape means, depending on how good you are, the editor has next to nothing to do. And he was great. When I'm dealing with people I really admire, especially funny people, for me, the gold standard is if I can make these guys laugh, that makes me happy. And I remember one of the topics that they sent me on the last Red Eye was that this guy somewhere fell in love with his sheep and had a passionate romantic romance with the sheep, and then he married the sheep. True story, apparently. And so they did that story. I said, Bill, what do you think? And I said, well, if he married the sheep, then there goes the passionate romance. And that really got a big laugh from him. I am looking forward to getting back out there and doing that. And more than that, I'm more excited about breaking into the pop culture thing with Doomcock, because from there I'd like to do Drinker if I can and Nerdrotic. Doomcock averages 300,000-400,000 views. I average 9,000. Wasn't always that way, but there you go. Dave Big Booty points out something else that I'd done. I did a series on Fox Business called American Made, and on season one I did 3 episodes for them. I did one on the Saturn V, I did one on the 747, and I did one on USS Nautilus. And then they asked me back to do a second season, so I did that a month ago. And I think I mentioned this before. So I went and talked about, it all blends together now, the atom bomb, which I knew something about, the lunar module, which I knew something about, and light bulb, which I knew nothing about. That was a crossed wire, if you'll pardon the expression. And so I did half an hour's worth of research and talked for 45 minutes about the light bulb. So they're out there somewhere. I don't know if they've been released. I obviously do need to be up on linking these things. There's just so many threads, you know. There's just it's like, you know, back when I was a boy, back when we used to shake our fists at rocks, you would be on TV and everybody's watching TV, and so you don't have to make a big announcement necessarily say I'm going to be on TV. But now with all these outlets being everywhere, you got to, you know, it's a full-time job getting out there. So Critical Drinker and Sargon did Demolition Man. I'd like to do Ford versus Ferrari with Critical Drinker, because I practiced it here on the lounge and I couldn't believe how well that turned out. So anyway, yes, so definitely trying to get out there wider. And look, folks, I know this is not obvious, but I really am doing, honestly now, I'm doing two full-time jobs here. And I'm not joking about this. I mean, the last 2 or 3 days I've spent 7-8 hours on the animation. And it's, you know, it's just getting done. I learned from last time I did this, I showed some animation before the show last time or something, and the audio wasn't, you know, was slugged in audio and stuff, and please don't take this the wrong way, it's just part of my life, having grown up as an editor. I did a 3-minute kind of a caveat. I didn't record it because I didn't want it out there yet because it wasn't finished, about, you know, this is slugged in audio and this and this, and we're working on the sound effects and so on and this. And I laid all this stuff out, then I ran it, and then the comments were all, I can't understand. They don't sound like they're speaking from under helmets, and there should be, I can't hear there should be armor clinking. It's like, okay. They're just been, it's just, this is an editor thing, really. It really is. It's very unique to this particular position in show business of being an editor. And that is, I cannot count the times when you're an editor. It really is. It's actually really funny when you think about it. When you're an editor, your job consists of putting together a final product, but your job also consists of working in other people's notes, because you're not the producer. There are producer editors who are called predators, by the way, which I think is awesome, and I've done that a couple times. But generally speaking, I would put together a rough cut, and then I would run it past the producers, and they would make a couple of notes. By the time when I was doing Sunday Morning Shootout, may get a note or two. By then it was just a machine. And I cut that content in my head. I'll talk about that in a minute because it's kind of interesting. No, it's not. So anyway, so you'd show a rough cut, and then you would start the rough cut by saying, listen, the footage from camera 3 came in real dark, and so we're getting it done right now just for the rough cut. We've got the dark footage in there, but we'll get all that stuff straightened out. We'll get it right back to where it needs to be. So here's the rough cut. So I'd start running the thing, and I cannot tell you how many times this happened. Cut, shot, cut. What? Why is it so dark? It's dark because we had a problem with the camera. I just mentioned it, and then you know, again and again. It's like, people won't be able to see this. And why does this thing say Tom Cruise reaction. I mean, you can't just put that, and you really just want to go. It's just the way it is. It's the way it is. I remember my friend Fritz, who's an actor, was up for a big role, and he made it in the callbacks. Made it down to the final two, and when they were done, he didn't get the part, and they said, Fritz, we thought you were better. We really, honestly, truly did. We're not just blowing smoke at you. But we really wanted somebody who wasn't blonde. Because my friend Fritz is like Nordic blonde. And he said, I can dye my hair, Some people just can't. They can't get there. So anyway, so I'm working on that, and I think it's really good. And the main important thing is we're picking up the pace. So that's critical to this thing working. Otherwise, I'll have it ready by the turn of the next century. Let's go back to the page there. The page of pages. Get all these tabs open. Where is that? Where is that rascal? You'd think I'd have this a little bit more. What do I do with it? There it is. Sorry about that. Okay, so moving on. Here's Marusha Dark. Hooray! An eminent member. That's impressive. This is a big one. Let's see what we got. Hey, Bill. Given that visual language is a powerful tool for persuasion, I was wondering if you had a chance to watch Sargon of Akkad's video, The Progressive Skin Suit. In it, he uses terms to describe anyone who tries to infiltrate and subvert institutions and culture by putting on the mask of what you love in the hopes that you'll go woke. I haven't seen it, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. And there's more to this question, which I'll get to. But when I do the Doomcock show, I heard somebody else mention this after I mentioned it on the air. I don't know if they got it from me or whether it was just coincidence. But when you make Michael Durham, star of Star Trek Discovery, the unknown adopted sister of Spock, that's stolen valor. You are wrapping a nothing in a uniform, in a cloak of glory that they haven't earned. In a similar vein, I was wondering what you think of this metaphor I've come up with, which I call starting the pressure cooker. It's like boil the frog, but with a more positive outcome. The pressure cooker refers to a situation in which we force people to remain where they are and accept the consequences of their actions by preventing the release or escape of socio-political pressure, or in some cases migration, thus slow cooking the situation over time until it reaches a point when people finally say, I'm done, and decide to do something about it. It's sort of your appeal for what should happen to Californians. There's still more coming, and I'll get to that. This is the essence of the we've got to give it to them argument. That the only way to cure people of bad ideas is to give it to them. This is, if I understand you correctly, yes. You want all these things? Here they are. How do you like them? How do you like this president? This guy who's, more competent than Donald Trump, but much nicer. How's that working out for you? How does that, all of that wisdom that came with 50 years in the Senate play out in terms of his ability to command foreign policy? This is it. And pressure cooker, again, Marisha, I haven't finished the post, so there may be a lot of stuff I'm missing here, and undoubtedly I am. But the situation in Australia is so totalitarian that when I say I think it's a good thing, what I mean by that is I've come to the sad realization, reluctantly, over a long period of time, that this is about the only thing that has any chance of actually changing the situation, is getting people so torqued that it becomes intolerable. That's really what it takes. It's going to have to become not just inconvenient, not just uncomfortable. It's going to have to become intolerable, and then we won't tolerate it anymore. And until it becomes intolerable, we will tolerate it. Because that's what I learned about COVID-19, is that people will talk and talk and talk, but no one's going to do anything serious until it becomes intolerable. And the situation in Australia is looking intolerable. And we're going to find out a lot in a week from this California recall election. I shot a show on Tuesday, and this is one of the few times that things like this fell through the cracks. I put it on the drive. Scott didn't see it. I didn't send him an email about it. So the show I shot on Tuesday called A New Hope should be up now, but it should have been up on Tuesday night. And I talk about the Project Veritas thing where they out that communist professor. I think I talked about it on the lounge last week. And then they do the school board meeting, and the parents are red hot furious. They're saying, this isn't just a question of firing this guy. I want a criminal investigation as to why this happened. So the point of that is that, yes, these people had probably heard that their kids were being indoctrinated, but when they heard the actual voice and saw the actual picture of this smug, horrible, communist ragdoll baby, then they began to realize, holy crap, this is real. And the entire point of that is an enormous difference between people who don't know and people who don't care. And I remember the first time I ever laughed at a word joke was when somebody said, hey, Bill, what's the difference between ignorance and apathy? I said, no. I said, I don't know and I don't care. And I thought that was just the cleverest thing in the world. Anyway, the fact that people are outraged about it when they see it is extraordinarily helpful. We forget how much information that we have because we have it. People don't know what they don't know, and they don't know a lot. So, and this business about pressure cookers is great because, Marusha, the fact of the matter is, the reason California is so screwed up is because they screw up California, and then the people who voted to screw up California leave, and then they go screw up someplace else. And if they had to stay here and live with the results of their bad decisions, then they wouldn't make such bad decisions. So there's no consequences for this. So back to the question. We see this in blue districts, in academia, media, social media, Afghanistan, the UK, Australia, commie countries, and mass migration in general, wherein people are allowed to leave and escape their problems to those with the greatest willpower those with the greatest willpower are removed from the fight, making things worse for those who remain. Absolutely true. Parenthetically, on this point, somebody pointed out as far as this recall election goes is that one thing that's working against us is so many conservatives have left California. The people who would have voted for Larry Elder, and we'll find out, but the people who could have made the difference have gone. And this is, if I understand your argument correctly, and it's a great argument, that's exactly what we're seeing. The pressure cooker would force them to stay and confront these, forming a more permanent solution through grassroots efforts. This is such a great comment and question. I just have to keep jumping in and making remarks before I forget them. This is my main argument against political refugees from other countries. En masse. America has been self-selected for people who are not willing to put up with crap at home and come here. And I understand that it's hypocritical to say now we're going to close the doors, and I'm not talking about that. But there does come a point when you see people, especially when you see people like young men without their families, there comes a point when if your entire society is a hellhole, there comes a point where at what point are you going to become responsible for fixing this? What are you going to do? And this is the lesson, the brutal lesson of Afghanistan and Iraq after 20 years. What are you willing to do to make this better? In the early days of the Iraq invasion, I mean early, 2004, no later than 5. I remember when the Iraqis first voted for the first time and they're holding up their stained fingers, and I said to myself, this is it. This is going to work. This is worth the effort. And I don't want to get into a whole lot of detail about this, but I remember thinking, okay. And because they were risking their lives to do that. They weren't just like, oh, it's so inconvenient, I have to show an ID to vote. No, these people were risking their lives to vote, and they were overwhelmingly pleased with it. And then all the corruption and the inertia set in, and then you find out that the Iraq Constitution is going to be Sharia-based, and then it's like, well, what? Do it or don't, But there comes a point when you have to take responsibility, at least for your own part of it. I mentioned earlier that I didn't have a topic today for moving back to America as I'm driving in, and just as a miracle, I remembered, 9/11, 20 years, I might want to talk about that. But the other thing I was going to talk about was I was thinking about talking about the Freedom of Information Act, because it looks like Dr. Fauci may be in some trouble. And the reason he may be in some trouble is because, despite his assertions, there is a written paper, electronic paper trail indicating that no, he knew full well what he was doing and that Rand Paul was absolutely right. And anybody who watched that exchange knows Rand Paul is right. You did gain of function research. No, I didn't. You took viruses and you increased their transmittability to humans. That is gain of function. That is not gain of function. And Fauci saying, and this and the paper, you don't understand the paper you're looking at. This paper's been reviewed up and down the scientific community by you. So Fauci is basically saying no, by giving these viruses function, that's not gain of function. Well, there's that exchange, and now apparently there's the paperwork to back it up. And the paperwork came because individual citizens, I forget the name of the group, filed a Freedom of Information Act request. And they released a large number of these documents. And this is how the Stratosphere Lounge works, right? We start on one, go down one rabbit hole, come out another one. And that's the fun of it. But and I might do this on Monday or Tuesday for Moving Back to America, because I was going to do the show today called FOIA, F-O-I-A. That's what the title was going to be. Because as I think about it, I realize the Freedom of Information Act is maybe the most radical piece of legislation since the Constitution. Freedom of Information Act is exactly what a fair, healthy, vigorous society should have. And I thought, well, since I got nothing else to talk about, I'll talk about the Freedom of Information Act. And I thought, let's break it down. We know what freedom is, and we know that, and we know what information is, and we know how information is being restricted and all the rest of it. But the thing about the Freedom of Information Act that's important is the act part. I know it refers to an act of Congress, but that's not how FOIA works. In order for FOIA to be effective, somebody has to act. FOIA doesn't just release documents. You have to go through the process of demanding specific documents. And you get them. You get them. I have been gobsmacked at the stuff that they've gotten through the Freedom of Information Act. Absolutely gobsmacked by it. Just what? They released this? Yes, they had to. They're required by law to release it. Now, I understand the rule of law is directly under attack and all the rest of it, but here it was. This is my point about what I was making earlier about being responsible for your own society. It's like they're covering all this stuff up. Okay, well, there's legislation that says that if you make an official requirement, they're required to give it to you. And somebody did. And they did. They did. We demand to see these papers. And here's the articles of the Freedom of Information Act that give us the authority to demand these things. And then they get them. And now he's on the ropes. Now, it's not perfect, obviously, and there's redactions and all the rest of it. But nevertheless, the entire idea is so beautiful to me that this country could at one time have been so healthy to say that a private citizen has the legal power to essentially subpoena documents. And any citizen can do it. I thought, God, that is fantastic, man. That is fantastic. And the reason that this leads to a healthy society is because we're talking about public documents and we're talking about things, we're not talking about private, we're not talking about Fauci's emails to his wife or anything. We're talking about things that have an impact in public. I don't have any desire to read other people's mail, and I have no desire to invade their privacy. But when you're talking about documents that pertain to my welfare and our welfare, and certainly this COVID thing has made a bit of an impression. Once that happens, now it's fair game. And so the ability to demand it and get it is astonishing. It's astonishing to me. And makes me, feel better. Now, as people in the comment section have pointed out, well, So you've got the information. Now what? Hillary, as Marusha pointed out, was as nakedly guilty as, let's not use that word with her, as guilty as possible. And there's no question about it, but they didn't even take her to trial. Now the question is, what's going to actually happen to Fauci? Now there's a paper trail. I don't think Rand Paul's going to just sit still on this, and I don't think the Republicans are going to sit still on this either. You know, I don't know if I mentioned this on the lounge last time. Maybe it was, where was it? I don't remember. But I don't know how many of you fully realize this, but if Larry Elder wins, if Newsom is recalled, it looks almost certain like it'll be Larry Elder. And if Larry Elder is elected governor of California, then he has the power to appoint a replacement for Dianne Feinstein, who by all accounts is incapable of functioning. She is apparently now more gone than the president is, the presidentish is, than Joe Biden is. That's a slip of the tongue. So think about that. If this happens, we not only get a Republican governor, we get a Republican senator. That's going to change things significantly. Tim Morris says nothing will happen to Fauci unless Biden needs a massive distraction like he's in the hospital or something. Yes, but look, Congress has not been completely neutered, right? I mean, when we were in the middle of the Obama years, I watched Trey Gowdy, who I just worship. And I worship him because Gowdy was a bulldog. He just, when Comey was doing all this other stuff in the waning days of the Obama administration, Gowdy just wouldn't let him go. And this is when my wife first moved to America, and I'm watching Hillary just get away with murder, literally murder. And I pointed out, here's Gowdy and one or two others. These are real Americans, and they're doing what they're doing. Trey Gowdy for Attorney General. Marusha, you're on a roll tonight. Why? Why was he not Attorney General on day one of Trump's administration? I don't know. But I will say that he'd be a better attorney. I used to think he'd be a great president. He would be a great president, but Attorney General would be where he belongs, because there's something about Gowdy that he has in common with Rudy Giuliani, who was also a prosecutor, and that is an unwillingness to tolerate evil and crime, a moral unwillingness to tolerate it. It's not like this is my job. It's like I took this job because I hate to see cheaters win, and there you go. So yeah, Helio says only if you dissolve the FBI is the first act. We needed something like the FBI. Maybe instead of dissolving it, I would just fire everybody. But in any event, that's that. So let's just wrap this up here with her. Maybe do one or two more after this. I would argue that America was forged in a pressure cooker, and in that we had nowhere else to flee. Excellent point. We fled with fleas from Britain and came here, and there was nowhere else to go. This was as good as it was going to get. Once you start pushing on Americans as they've come to America, there's nowhere else for us to go. And so I would argue that America was forged in a pressure cooker and that we had nowhere else to flee, so our only option was to stand and fight. And because we burned the boats and fought for our freedom rather than fleeing or having it handed to us, we treasure it more and guard it fiercely, unlike many of the places we seek to liberate. See, I hadn't read that when I made the points earlier, but if I had, then that would have been redundant. Great minds think alike, and so do you and I. The same can be said of every other successful revolution in history. As you say, sometimes the best solution is to give people exactly what they ask for and give it to them good and hard. The only question is, how do we do it without becoming authoritarians ourselves? I'm watching what's happening in Australia, and somebody put their finger on it in a comment I saw earlier. Might have been this morning on the live shoot of Moving Back to America, where somebody said, I thought the Australians had more moxie than this. I didn't think they put up with this. I thought we had more moxie than this too. But back to the pressure cooker thing. What is happening in Australia is compressing that society. It's not just oppressing it, it's compressing it. It is building pressure. And I find myself on a daily basis becoming not like running around in a spittle rage, but running around in a whittle rage. Get it? See what I did? No, but it's like I find myself more and more and more disgusted and angry about things that I used to uh, not be so upset about. And you cannot lie to people forever. Totalitarian regimes eventually fall. And Glenn Reynolds pointed this out back in 10 years ago. He said that history seems to show that the more repressed the society is, the faster and the more dramatic the thing falls when that tipping point comes. And a tipping point is a great example. For those of you not familiar with it, it's like, let's say you have a flat tray, and you got a bunch of big ball bearings on there, and it's precariously balanced. Suddenly you move one a little bit, and as it moves, it starts to tilt the board. And as the board starts to tilt, then everything moves, and it happens very fast. So, the people that are doing this are in a full court press now. And we'll see. Now, there's an interesting point here. Eric Blake said, odd thing is that Stalin wasn't a tipping point for Russia. Stalin wasn't a tipping point for Russia because when Stalin took power, people believed in the Soviet Union. The Russian people believed in it. They were proud of it. And a lot of what Stalin did, this is common to Stalin and to Hitler. Huge numbers, probably the vast majority of the Germans and the Soviets would see these atrocities, and their first reaction was, somebody has to tell Hitler about this. Somebody's got to tell Hitler that they're killing all these Jews. Somebody has to tell Stalin that people are disappearing. This is what they thought all the time. I mean, just endless examples of this. And then people who had a better idea of what's going on understood this. But they put up with Stalin because Stalin was delivering the goods. The Russian people have been oppressed forever. They didn't have a history of freedom. The Tsar and all the rest of it, they're out in the fields toiling their entire lives to help pay for a Fabergé egg. And so what Stalin and Lenin delivered was, well, holy cow, we used to be a rural backwater, although the Romanovs were really starting to kick ass when the revolution happened. But Russia, just prior to the revolution, was really starting to pick up speed. And he delivered. They're looking around and they're seeing all this industry and all of this other stuff, the collective farms. They believed in this. They believed in it. And broke college student, and again, getting to be really good bench here in the live action part of the Stratosphere Lounge, said Stalin also beat back Hitler. Yeah, a lot of people who didn't like Stalin watched what Hitler did to their country and said, well, we couldn't have made it without Stalin. That was another common belief, was that all of Stalin's atrocities and all of his purges, especially the purge of the Red Army and all the rest of it, was brutal and horrible, but it was necessary in order to beat the Russians, the Germans. But the Soviet Union collapsed because people stopped believing in it. We think that the Stalin, we look at all the totalitarianism and the murder and the secret police and all of that stuff from Stalin, and we think, well, that's why people should have been rebelling against it. But the fact of the matter is, most of the people were patriotic and thought that this was necessary. They were living in fear, yes, but they were proud of what they had. And that continued well into the 60s and into the 70s. Khrushchev beat the Americans. We put up a satellite before the Americans did. And then we put the first man in space before the Americans did. And he was delivering the goods. It's only when Brezhnev came along and it became obvious to everybody that this dolt doesn't believe in this, and that nobody believes in it anymore. That's what caused the Soviet Union to fall. My wife is, when she was very young, was part of this because she had to be. And they had to work on Saturdays and volunteer to go help in these things. And they would have these marches and these rallies, and people would hold these signs, pictures of the leaders' faces, and everybody knew it was a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It wasn't a joke. From the time they started in 1917 right up until about 72, 73, 74, it wasn't a joke. It became a joke when Brezhnev stopped delivering. This is an important thing to understand. The Russians put up with a lot. They paid a heavy price in World War II, paid a heavy price for communism, heavy price. But you could make the case, plenty of evidence to indicate that up until about 1970, up until the moon landing really, the Soviets were making the Russian people pay a huge price, but they were delivering. They were delivering. And it's only when Brezhnev and all of that stagnation occurred, and the Brezhnev stagnation and watching America just head out into the stratosphere again, that's when they lost belief. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's not a question of the oppression, it's a question of the belief. Do you believe in the system? And the majority of Russian people, despite the oppression and the lies and the propaganda and the shortages and all of that, they believed in communism, and they believed in it right up until Brezhnev. I'm talking about the majority of people. And then they stopped believing in it. And they stopped believing in it because their leaders stopped believing in it. One of the things that I liked most about the Cold War series was when I was talking about this move from Stalin to Khrushchev to Brezhnev, that you could see its effect on the population by the jokes that people were telling. There's a great deal to admire about the Russian people, and I admired these things about them long before I met my wife, and admire them more now that I have. But one of the things I admire the most about them is their ability to find black humor in adversity. That's how they cope. And I've always admired that, and I've always thought that their humor it's an acquired taste, but if you can get the taste, it's hilarious. So back in the Cold War, What We Saw series a couple years ago, I talked about the lowering levels of fear by relating 3 jokes that they told at the time, and I will tell them to you now. I mentioned this on the Micro podcast, I think, didn't I? Probably did. Yeah, I think I did. In Stalin's time, one of the jokes they would tell about Stalin was, it's a meeting of the 13th International or whatever, and there's 500 delegates, and Stalin is speaking. And in the middle of Stalin's speech, somebody sneezes, and the room goes silent. And Stalin looks up with his look, who sneezed? Who sneezed while I was talking? Stand up. The person who sneezed, stand up. Stand up. Who sneezed while I was speaking? And everybody's petrified, terrified. So he says, all right, first row, everybody stand up. Turns to the KGB, and they gun him down. Now, who sneezed? Tell me who sneezed. And everybody's still sneezed. Second row, stand up, and he guns him down. So finally he says, I will keep doing this until I find out who sneezed. And finally, a guy in the back, and raises his hand. He's shaking. He's terrified. And he says, I did it, Comrade Stalin. It was me. I didn't mean to. But I was the person who sneezed. Gesundheit, says Stalin. And then he goes on with his speech. That's a joke that has terror built into it. By the time you get to Khrushchev, it's less intimidated. The Khrushchev joke that I like was that the Russians told. So Comrade Khrushchev goes to visit a collective farm, pig farm, and they're tremendously huge pigs, and everything is just great. And there's pictures there, and Khrushchev wants to make a big deal of this. He wants to publicize this collective farm that he's endorsed, and shows that the Soviet way is better and everything. So they've got this picture of Khrushchev on this pig farm. And now the editors are proud to have a problem. They know that this has to run tomorrow, that Khrushchev's waiting for. They have to write an article, but they don't know how to caption it. What do we write? Do we write Comrade
Khrushchev among the pigs. That's going to sound like an ironic reference, or you know, or pigs. You know, Comrade Stalin proud of pigs. How do we do this? How do they do this? They wrestled with this. So finally, the paper comes out the next day. Pravda comes out the next day. There's the picture, and the caption is Comrade Stalin, Comrade Khrushchev, second from left, and that's considerably less ominous. By the time you get to Brezhnev, people are just openly mocking him. The Brezhnev joke is Brezhnev shows up one day at a Politburo meeting, and he's not wearing his medals. And everybody looks at him and says, Comrade Brezhnev, what happened to your medals? Because he loved his medals. And Brezhnev looks down and he goes, oh my God, I forgot to take them off of my pajamas. Descending levels of terror, but also descending levels of respect. And that's what really caused it. They lost faith in the system. And we are losing faith in our system. And they are intentionally causing us to lose faith on our system. So anyway, moving on. Here's another question from Marisha in the comment section. Bill, I recall you saying on several occasions that you didn't even have four figures in the bank until you were 40. So I was 43 or 45 or something. We also grew up a hotel in paradise. If you don't mind sharing what happened in between those two periods to cause you fall on hard times financially, and how'd you climb your way back up? I think a lot of people would find it inspiring to hear stories of others who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, given how often we're told such a thing is impossible. P.S. Totally unrelated, but some of the members on Discord asked if you make the poggers face for us to use as an emoji. Internet slang term, poggers. Slang term poggers means an expression of excitement or amazement. The slang for poggers originated on the gaming channel Twitch. This term started as an emoticon of a frog with a shock look of excitement of its face, but users needed a certain extension installed to be able to see it. Finally, someone just resorted to saying poggers, which most likely was derived from the emoticon being of a frog named Pepe. Oh, we all know Pepe. So there's a pogger emoji. I'm much less embarrassed telling you about how I came out of being broke for 3 decades than I am about making this face. Hail Keck. I said Hail Keck at a meeting of Young Americans for Freedom like 6-7 years ago, and the room just went mad. Just cheered and cheered and cheered. So I guess this is the pogger face. That's all you get. I'm going to take the rest of this question and then some Harry Lumley and some recall questions. So let me finish this one up, and then I think we'll call it a night here. Yeah, and some leftist was wearing a gorilla mask and threw an egg at Larry Elder. Nice people, these tolerant leftists. I say elder, yes. Anyway, so I will answer this, and then I'm going to call it a night. Oh, let's see. So we had lived in Bermuda, and then we'd actually lived in Bermuda, moved to Florida for about a year, and then went back to Bermuda for 6 months. Maybe moved to Florida for 2 years, back to Bermuda for 6 months, then back to Florida again. But my parents got divorced when I was probably 14, and my mom didn't ask for anything. She didn't ask for child support, didn't ask for alimony, just wanted to get it done. So all of a sudden, here's this single mom with, who'd been a housewife and wife of the hotel manager, and so she's got to get a job. So to her never-ending credit, we were living on Key Biscayne at the time, which then was slightly upper middle class, mostly solidly in a middle class. It was not a wealthy neighborhood at all. It's become that, but at the time it was just kind of a middle class neighborhood. And so she could have moved us to a lot cheaper housing and someplace else, but she didn't. So she just worked like crazy. But we were, from that point forward, we were always pretty tight. Now, my dad surprised the living daylights out of me many years after they got divorced. I was up visiting him, and he told me that he never made more than $45,000 in a year. That was his all-time highest pay. And I thought, wow, Dad, really? He said, yeah. Now, money was worth more back then. He said, but so much of what we got came from the hotel. Yeah, I got $45,000 a year, but free food down there if we wanted it, and all of the perks that came with it. So all of a sudden, anyway, this money's completely gone, and we are just barely, hanging on. So my mom's working nights, and I'm making dinner for the rest of the family, and so that's that. My dad had been telling me all the time growing up that that he was saving for my college education, and so came time for me to go to college, and there was no money for the college education. The University of Florida, since I was resident, wasn't terribly expensive, but even getting things like food plan was pretty tough. It was pretty hard, and I got on the food plan, and then somewhere in there, it's all kind of a blur to me. So I'm probably, at this point, I'm probably 18 or 19, 6'1", and I weighed about 122 pounds. So I went to the University of Florida, and I never had any money up there at all. The reason, and I didn't find the reason until 15 or 20 years later. It was a conversation with my father, which I'll never forget. But I remember being just so furious, my whole life. Oh, well, I can't do this for saving for your college. Well, here I am in college, and I'm starving. I don't have any money. Got nothing to eat. It turns out that that my dad had put a lot of money into a coin collection. He just liked it, and like a significant amount of money. So around the time my parents get divorced, he's not able to find much work anymore because he's too old to hire. And he'd had this coin collection, and the coin collection got stolen out of my grandmother's house, his mother's house. And we don't know this for sure, but we're relatively sure that it was stolen by one of our close relatives who had a real drug problem and who knew it was there. That's all I ever heard about it. It was rumor. Anyway, 15 years after I go to college, carrying all this anger around, I find out that I didn't get the money for college because my dad didn't have any money anymore. Nothing. Zero. Gone. So I found myself in college, and I'm with theater students. Now you got to understand that the traveling troubadour is always the poorest of the poor. It just comes with it. I lived in the student ghetto, which I didn't mind. It wasn't dangerous. It was just really, really run down. And I had actor roommates. And we had this one house where there were 4 of us living there, old wooden house. And I remember the night I moved in, I really loved the guys I was living with. They were great, funny guys and brilliant guys, great actors. But I remember when I brought my stuff, which consisted of a small suitcase. That was my stuff. And I moved in, and the living room, needless to say, there's no art on the walls, nothing. It's just white walls. And in the middle of the living room is a couch, and the couch there was like a waterfall of foam that came out of the bottom of the couch. It was the couch was like perched on this small pyramid of foam because the bottom of the couch had given out and all the foam had fallen out. So this just basically you're sitting in a depression with the springs. And the couch, I laughed at the time too. And the couch is facing a TV, but the TV is on a heater. Now this heater was built into the wall. I don't remember much about it, but I remember it was like a heater that was built into the wall. And the TV was on top of the heater. And the TV had melted into the heater because some idiot had put the television on the heater and watched TV and fell asleep, and then the TV melted. And so I moved in, and one of our roommates was like, "Hey man, you got to listen to this. What is it? It's an album by a band called the Talking Heads. It's called Remain in Light." I thought, I'm coming off of Debbie Boone being, the number one rock and roll song in America, and I started listening to Talking Heads. I said, "This is awesome, awesome, cool." Um, so, so there I was, and this is when I never ever believed in communism, but I remember uh, being absolutely convinced that communism was a catastrophe because we would take what little money we had and go out buy groceries, and we'd get up in the morning and most of our milk is gone because one of our roommates took it and didn't replace it. The thing I remember most about those days in terms of that is two things. I remember going out to buy bone burgers, and I remember how bone burgers taste. I didn't come up with the name. You could go to Albertsons, which was Skaggs Albertsons at the time, and you could buy a box of like 12 hamburger patties for like $2.60 or something like that. And they were perfectly circular and frozen solid. They were like hockey pucks. And you bring them back and you kind of wedge them apart and throw one on a frying pan, and you a couple pieces of white bread and some ketchup, and you're good to go. And and when you fried these things, they didn't turn pink. They were gray. They were gray all the way through, gray on the outside, gray on the inside. They weren't brown on the outside, they were just gray. And when you heated them up, they became hot and gray. And I remember biting into one of these things and thinking, this is kind of like meat without the meat in it. And we looked at the ingredients on the back of this, and the ingredients on these so-called hamburgers. Number one ingredient was ground bone meal. But that's what we did. There was a time when I was staying with a friend of mine, and we were so hungry and so broke that we went out and I'll never forget this. We bought like 2 packages of hot dogs that had the cheese in it, and you'd heat them up, and then they cut little slices in them, and then the cheese would kind of come out. And I thought, man, these are delicious. And after 4 days, I thought I was going to. I thought I'd rather eat dirt than eat another one of those damn hot dogs. So that's basically it for college. And I remember very, very clearly for years, 2 years at least, there were 3 or 4 of us, and we would get together, and this is genuinely how it would happen. We would get together and we'd say, "What do you guys have?" And I've got this, and we pool our money together. We might have $4.60, something like that. So we would go to this burger place, which was called Wubs. It was a chain, and for $4 we could get a certain amount of get 2 hamburgers and fries, and we'd split them, and that was pretty much it for the day. And the other thing I remember very clearly was we all would hang out at this. We had we had our own kind of place. There was a restaurant in Gainesville called the Windjammer, and it was an old restaurant. And in the back there was a big room, and the theater department owned the back room. We'd just go there every night. It was open except for Sundays. I was at the Windjammer every single night talking about acting and life and all this other stuff. And they had something there called the Windjammer Special, which was a couple pieces of white bread. I don't even think it was toasted. And then they'd lay some turkey on it, and maybe some ham on top of that, and then they just cover the whole thing in white gravy. And I lived on Windjammer Specials. And the thing that I'll never forget is that there were a number of acting professors there, and some of them were better than others. But one of them came out drinking with us every night, and his name was David Shelton. He's still with us. And David Shelton was the only guy at the University of Florida who knew what he was doing. He was universally respected. He was often in the plays. He was just a really good actor. Suffered from polio as a kid and had a pretty pronounced limp. And you'd be in, this was new for me, you'd be in class learning from this guy, and then 4 hours later, you'd be drinking beer with him. And learning a lot. And that was actually a magical time. It really was. 3-4 years there where we would just rehearse, during the day and do scenes, and I would be directing. We'd be in directing class, and we'd do scenes, and we'd go out. And I was in acting, got to acting 2 or 3, and I was a terrible actor. And Shelton never never ceased letting me know about that. I did a scene once with him. I was a better director than I was an actor. I did a scene once, and so you do the scene, and then you stop the scene, and then you stand there, and he gives you notes, and he's usually pretty brutal on the notes. And we finished this one scene, and I just stood there, and he looked at me, and he just said, just sit down. Many years later, as I got to be, when I was no longer a student there, went back to a reunion, and I asked him about that. I said, why were you so hard on people? You were vicious with people. And he said something I never forgot, and I never realized at the time, and makes me love him even more. He said I was vicious with people who I knew were not going to make it. And when I say knew were not going to make it, I don't mean people who simply could not act and could not be made to act, but they had in their head the idea that they're going to go out and be actors. And he said that the sooner I disabuse them of this idea, the happier they'll be. He's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I really was stunned by that. It's like, yeah, I was hard on everybody, but the people I was brutal on were the people who needed to know that they were not actors and never were going to be. That's actually extremely noble. That's really the definition of tough love. The reason I mentioned Shelton and the Windjammer special is because he was, he's a tenured professor at the University of Florida in theater, but that's not exactly high income. And he paid for so many Windjammer specials. He didn't offer to pay for them. This is just how it worked. If the Windjammer special was $4.50 plus tip, plus all the beer, we would go there and we'd all put down all the money we had, which would usually amount to, $2. And he'd pick up the difference every time, every night. And afterwards, I estimated he must have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on us. One night at a time, just picking up. Everybody would put down their money. He wasn't buying us dinner's on me, nothing like that. We'd all just get there, we'd order what we can, and we'd kind of do this sort of shuffle where, well, here's my money for the Windjammer special. It's like, well, it's $4.95, and you just put down $3. And he'd just pick it up. An amazing guy. And that's why everybody loved him. And we went to his farewell party when he finally retired. And I flew back to Florida to be there. And I saw the people I went to school with. And I went back to Florida 10 years after I was in school. And I met a whole group of people there that were 10 years younger than me. I saw them too. And I saw people who were 5, 6, 7 years older than me, all the way down to people who were 20 years younger than me. And everybody's in this room for this guy. He was that kind of guy. David Shelton, still here. I saw his Facebook page just the other day, in fact. I was wondering how he's doing. So that's, how we got along. And we got along with things like saying, well, if I still have money, if I haven't run out of checks, we float checks for pizza. I never really intentionally wrote a bad check, but I wrote a number of checks. I didn't get to have the deposit made in time, and so on and so forth, and ended up having to pay for all of those too. And here's the fun thing about being broke: you buy you write a check for a $8 pizza, and the check bounces. You have to pay the pizza company the $8, and then you have to pay the bank $30. So you just bought a $38 pizza. So that went on and on and on, and I got student aid for a while, which kept me going, and then that disappeared, and then I got work study for a while, and then that disappeared, and finally, when I was about, I want to say it was like 20 credits short of my degree, something like that. I just couldn't keep it going anymore. Just had to come back to Florida, back to South Florida, and get a job in Fort Lauderdale. And I remember thinking, okay, pack it up. I'm going to go down to Florida. I had worked as a security guard for a year prior to going to school there. I went to Miami-Dade Community College for my first year, which is high school with ashtrays. And I thought I'll just go back and work semester or two, and I'll come back and finish up. But it's like taking a nap in the middle of a blizzard, you know. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go home and I'll come back to college in a quarter or two. No, you won't. So I didn't. So I didn't graduate. Um, so so that was the college years, and then I went back to Florida. Fortunately, I'd had the planetarium job was kind of open for me, so I kind of went back to that. I started there when I was 13, and I worked there until I was 33. I didn't do that continuously, but I did it. It was something I could go back to. And by the way, it felt like going back. It felt like failure. You go back to you know, to the job you had before you went to college, and it's not a good feeling. And I was a waiter. I was the worst waiter who ever lived for 6 months. The only reason I was a waiter, I put off being a waiter for all the time in college, and there was a place down there called Ed DeBevick's, which was, some of you probably remember the name. It was kind of a 50s diner, but they did the whole thing up where it was just fun. It was funny and cool. So I did that, and Astronerd said Doug was there, right? Are you talking about Doug Gagan, Astronerd, by any chance? Uh, if you're talking about Doug Gagan, yes, Doug Gagan was there when I started. Yeah, I was a world's worst waiter, but I was funny, and that helped a little bit, made up for it. Holy cow, Astronerd, how do you know Doug Gagan? Um, Doug Gagan was, he was the best console operator I ever saw. And I constantly tried to be as good as him. And I think when I was finally at the peak of my game, I think I might have been a little bit better. But watching Doug Gagan was like the time I told you about when I watched Glenn Beck work a room. I said, man, I'm the best speaker I ever saw in my life. I am. And then I saw Beck, and I was like, oh, this guy's awfully good. Jeez, he's really, really, really good. And it was a wonderful feeling. You know, some people are intimidated by that. It's like, my God, here's somebody finally. I could probably, I think I could probably take him, but I'd have to be on my A game. It's very competitive like that. I was anyway. Anyway, stayed back and did that, and I was working for, a bunch of guys. We had like a little company trying to do commercials and all of this. And the main reason I stayed poor for so long was because I just never gave up on the entertainment dream. You know, I'd already had to give up on my pilot dream and my astronaut dream, and I just decided, no, I like making movies and I'm good at it, and I just never gave up. And there you go. I did some 3D graphics for the University of Florida when I went back there. I was out here as a limo driver for 4 years. And as a limo driver, I got a chance to drive some really interesting people. And one of them was the head of the doctors group at Kaiser Permanente. And he said, he got me a job as a writer for Kaiser Permanente. I was writing comedy for Kaiser Permanente. I was writing introductions for people during their annual employees dinner. And I just mail those things in. So in any event, the short form is I just basically hung on like that forever. And I was living one gig to the next, just gig job to the next, just somehow managing to get there. Pretty much crashed and burned in '98. My uncle Ted said, come spend some time in Australia. I just ejected. Oh, there's Doug Hagen. Somebody's. Oh man. Let me see if I can find this. Give me a moment. No, I'm not going to waste time. It's just going to be bad. Doug was the sharpest guy I met, and they just sent a link to it. He died in 2016 at 67, and he died of Alzheimer's and dementia. And I never saw him again after I was 14 or 15, but my friend Phil was. Constant contact with him and stayed friends with him. He became a planetarium director someplace else. It was a real surprise and a real pleasant surprise um, when I did the Mike Rowe show, and he started off by talking about Jack Horkheimer. Um, I was really surprised, but Horkheimer had it. Mike Rowe said he got into the business because of Jack Horkheimer. So anyway, so I just hanging on, just hanging on, and at some point, I'm sure I could have just completely bailed out and just gotten a real job, but I just didn't, and I decided I'd rather be, broke and hungry than, and I just always believed in it, and the funny thing about this, talking about privilege earlier, Marusha, but I mean, I was flat broke, living hand to mouth for almost 30 years. And and never once did I feel like a poor person. I was dirt poor, but I never felt like a poor person. I felt like a guy with a cash flow problem. Um, I just always believed in it, always did. And strangely enough, things really broke for me and started to happen when I gave up believing in it. I just coming home one night in 2000, driving down the freeway from a 3 o'clock online session in the morning, and I thought, wow, you know what, Bill, you missed the train, buddy. You made a reach for it, but it's gone. You're an editor, and you're going to stay an editor, and it's not a bad life, but you're going to be working for 24-year-olds for the rest of your life, and that's the way it is. Just stop beating yourself up over it. And then next thing you know, it's 2001, 9/11 happens. I'm not writing then. Then my dad dies in 2002. I write about that funeral. That becomes the essay, which became Honor, which was the first of the Eject, Eject, Eject. And I was still writing Eject, 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 but I didn't have a regular salary until, I didn't have regular income until 2002 or three. And the worst of it was, um, even though I ended up working on Sunday Morning Shootout as an editor for 5 years, there's 160 shows. That's the kind of thing you just dream about in show business. You can't admit that's like, it's a gold mine. The jobs I was working were jobs for 2 or 3 months, and then it's like, okay, well, now what do we do? Just live my whole life like that. It's not fun. And the problem with the fact that I worked for 5 years on Sunday Morning Shootout is I never knew it was going to be for 5 years. It was I did 5 years, 3 months at a time. Every single 3 months, are we going to get renewed? Don't know. We're right on the bubble. Okay. Um, hang on a second. Oh, somebody talking about Doug in North Carolina. Yeah, yeah. So somewhere around there, I realized I had more or less steady work. This is before I went to PJTV, just before. And even though they would constantly say, we're supposed to get paid today. Yeah, we're not going to be able to pay until next Tuesday. That kind of thing. But anyway, I was working as an editor, and that was a decent paying job. When I got back from Australia, I was just on the rocks. My Uncle Ted said, "Come to Australia." I went to Australia for 3 months. Um, uh, and when I came back, I had to send my cats to my mom in Florida to watch. Went to Australia, came back, and I had $40, and this is not an exaggeration. This is the actual, honest to God's truth. I had $40, but I had good friends, not just close friends, friends who were good people. Stayed in my friend Fritz's garage for, I don't know, a year, something like that. Um, and then Fritz's wife Margie saw an opening for an editor and set me up for this interview, which was in Orange County, and they drove me down there. So I didn't have a car. And I ended up working for Burrid Productions, Burrud. Bill Burrid had done a nature series. I remember watching it as a kid, and his son John had a production company. He was looking for an editor, put an ad out. I went down and interviewed for it. For some amazing reason, he not only hired me, but he advanced me a week's pay, which I thought was astonishing. Uh, and this is when I turned the corner, right at this time. So I moved from my friend's garage, who was living up in the northern part of the valley, up in just above Hanson Dam there. And then next thing you know, they drive me down to Orange County. His office was in Orange County, Huntington Beach, and I found the cheapest motel I could find, which was $80 a week. It's called the Princess Motel, and I had bought a used bicycle for $13, something like that. So I stayed in the hotel. I took the bicycle up into the room with me every night, and I didn't have anything to do. I had been doing videos for the University of Florida while I was in Florida, but it was, intermittent. But I'd had that relationship, and so that guy asked me to continue to do these videos. And again, John Burrett, who's become a fan over the years, I didn't even know it. I ran into him 4 or 5 years ago. But once again, I said, he let me come in early and stay late and use his editing machines on my own time. So that's about what I did. So I was in this Princess Motel for 5 or 6 weeks, I think, and I'd get up around 4:30 or 5. I'd get on my bike. I would ride my bike in. I would stop at donut shop, get a couple of donuts, and I'd go in and edit this other project from about 6 a.m. until I started on the regular work at 9, and then I'd work 9 to 5 or 6, and I'd go get a quick bite to eat, come back and edit until midnight. And it sounds like, wow, but there's nothing to do at the Princess Motel, so that's what I did. And then after doing that for about 6 weeks, I was able to hang on to it. That when that second job paid me, I was able to get an apartment. I'll never forget this either. I went to look for apartments, affordable apartments, and I'm in there, and and I fill out the credit application, all this other stuff. I'll never forget this as long as I live. They were the person who took my application form had to call the office, and they had to call the office, and she said, his credit score it's 400 or something like that, and she said she didn't know what to do because she'd never seen one that was like, what is the bottom? I'll tell you what my credit score was. I just forgotten. Hang on. This is for my benefit, not yours. I'm just curious. Used to be right here. Where is it? Damn you. Here we go. Stand by. Oh, I thought this would tell me what the bottom was, but it was the bottom of the bottom. And 450? Okay, that's what it was. And whatever the number was, it was that. And I remember the humiliation of that, And that was something that stayed with me for another 10 or 15 years. That kind of, every time I had to apply for something, I was like, I got this credit score, it's going to be, they're just going to say no. So I went to this place and they said, sorry. And they said, there's a place that might take you as even lower income. And I went there. It wasn't a bad place at all. And I was riding my bike to work. And I was riding my bike for several months. And thank God I did, because I was thinking about this about a week ago. It'd be interesting to know when you get to heaven, when was your closest brush with death prior to actually dying? I've always wondered about that. I don't obsess on it, but it's interesting to think about. And one night, I was riding my bike home from the editing job. It was about 11:30 or 12, and it was about a 15-minute bike ride. And I'd been doing it for months and months and months. And thank God, because if this had happened to me earlier, maybe it wouldn't be here. It was a foggy night, like really thick fog. And this was not bad neighborhoods. These were decent neighborhoods. I'm riding my bike home the way I usually did, same route every night. And I'm riding along, and I see these three Latino guys in a car pull over on the side of the road. They're kind of behind me. They pull over on the side of the road, and I remember looking back over my shoulder and watching them get out of the car, and one of these guys starts running towards me as fast as he can. And I remember just stepping on the brakes, and then this guy's just he's chasing me down to knock me off this bike. And the only thing I remember saying is I turned to this guy and said, "I don't even know who you are." That's the only thing I could think of. So so it was it was like a movie. I am racing as fast as I can on this bike, and this guy was very fast, and I could hear the footsteps getting closer and closer and closer and closer, and then suddenly they're not getting closer, and then they're just starting to fade away and fading away, fading away, fading away, and I just kept on going, and I look back over my shoulder and I see the guy stop running. Now he's running back to his car. Now, I still don't know whether they thought I was somebody else or whether they just thought I was just an easy guy, because I don't know what kind of money you think you're going to get on a guy with a bicycle, but nevertheless, they were after me and had intended harm. So I'm zooming through there, and thank God it was foggy, and I just decided to make the first turn, and then I'm going to turn another way, and I'm going to turn another way. I'm not going to take any main streets. I'm just going to go where they don't expect me. Never saw them again. So anyway, that was exciting, and worked for them. And I remember I got a job at in a movie studio. My friend Alex Campbell got me a job as a production manager, and no, post-production supervisor, which I knew nothing about. And that was a raise from $650 a week to $800 a week. And then I was a post-production supervisor, and another guy who's gotten to be a fan over the years basically taught me how to edit on the Avid. I'd used non-linear editing systems before, but he showed me how to work the Avid. And then next thing you know, I can edit on the Avid. And then I just started getting freelancer jobs. And somewhere around 2004 or 5, somewhere around there, or 6, I was able to consistently have, more than hundreds of dollars in the bank. And I remember my dad talked about this many years later. It's like, because he died in 2002, so I hadn't even fully arrived at this point yet. But when I was working regularly, because he, like all dads, it's like he was he said to me, "What's the best part about being about being employed?" Because I've been doing gigs things. 800 a week sounds like a lot of money. In Los Angeles, it's not a lot of money. The rents here for a one-bedroom apartment are $2,000 a month, something, a little less. He said, "What's most noticeable now that you're working consistently?" And I didn't even think about it. I said, I when I stop for gas, I fill the car up. And he never forgot that. He used to joke with me about that. But I think that's probably really what it comes down to. If you really want to know what it's like, since you asked, it's having to go to the gas station and get gas every other day because you can't put more than $5 worth of gas in the car. You just don't have it. And when I was able to fill her up, I remember thinking, wow, I have arrived. I have arrived. Told you I stayed with my friend Fritz, and I had some miracle. I got into a Ford Escort. Loved that car. Looked like a miniature Taurus. Loved it. I couldn't believe I got into it. I really couldn't. I never missed a car payment ever, and I haven't since then. And when things started to finally turn the corner in 2012, I realized I could afford to get my first new car ever in my life, so I got a 2012 Camaro. And the car that I had, the Escort, was in really good shape. Really good shape. And I told you about my friend Fritz, who put me up and did all this other stuff. He had a van that was breaking down, and they only had the 2 cars, and his Astra van was really getting unreliable. So instead of trading that Escort in, I just gave it to him. I just gave it to him. Here, this is yours. Thank you. Paid back all the money I owed him, and I gave him the car. and it was a really good feeling, and I would visit him in the years afterwards, and visit him in the drive my Camaro up to his house, and there'd be my car, my old car. I loved that car, loved it, loved it, loved it, loved that car, loved it, and I think he still got it. Lady Hawk says, Dad passed at 77, Mom at 91. Is that you? Because my dad died at age 77 and my mom died at 91. So, anyway, yeah, Marisha Dark, worst part of being poor is the feeling of shame. That's precisely correct. Going in to like apply for an apartment or something like that, and knowing, it's like, here it comes, I might get approved, but I'm going to get the whole thing. Yeah, it's shameful. And Mobile Moto says shame is the best part of being poor too. I was never, I, there was certainly this constant sense of shame, but I was never. It's a weird thing to explain. I was carrying this shame with me, but I wasn't ashamed of myself. I don't know how to put it like that. That's the only way I can think of it. There was the shame of not having any money, but I was never ashamed of myself. And the only thing I can think of that even comes close to that is when people say, Bill, do you miss flying? And I say, no, I don't miss flying, but I miss being a pilot. I know that doesn't make sense, but that's really it. So that's how it happened. But the reason that I'm here, aside from the fact that I had great friends and people who just constantly bailed me out and kept me going, but the main reason I'm here is because I decided I was going to live in the Princess Motel at $80 a week and ride my bike to work at 5 o'clock in the morning to not give up doing what I wanted to do. I came in and I got up at 4:35, was in working a second job at 5:36 in the morning, and then I'd work it till midnight, and I did that for years. And then it kept going. When I told you I got a job as a post-production supervisor, and this was during the .com boom. I worked for a company called iz.com, and they were like online retailers, way ahead of the curve on this, and they were very clever going into it. They had one of these brand new internet geniuses, 1999, and they were going to sell this stuff online on iz.com, and their plan was, and I thought this was brilliant, was they had the money to produce a TV show, and they wanted to produce a half-hour show that was really cool, and they would run that on paid programming time late at night on TV stations. After a certain hour, when there's no programming, you'd get all these infomercials, right? And they cost next to nothing. That time is nearly free for the TV station. So Iz produced a relatively low budget show about really cool things using Iz products and stuff that we were selling, and then finally they put it on those hours, and that drove people to the website. So grand. So I'm working for Iz and really enjoying myself, having fun, working with some people I worked with before. It was that was the show that was so much fun that when it was over, we had our cast party and everybody was just really, really, really sad. And it was just one of those magical groups. And the production supervisor said something I'll never forget, because I've been working gigs for my whole life, pretty much almost. And we were really sad. We were practically crying because we really enjoyed this show. It was a fun show, and we had a great, great, great group of people. And it was a cast party, and everybody's feeling kind of sad. And this guy stood up and said, guys, I know everybody's feeling sad. And he said, look, we'll all work together again, just not at the same time. And I thought, yeah, and that's how it played out. Anyway, I was wrapping up one night. I lived in Orange County. I was working in Hollywood, and when I still don't know how I survived this. I really genuinely don't. I would go home, and I was so tired that I'd get on the freeway, and I remember thinking, I hope the car in front of me is going to my apartment, because I can't do anything other than just. It was brutal. It was dangerous, stupid. I just wouldn't get enough sleep. So anyway, I was there wrapping up around 11:30 or 12 at night, and the internet genius came in. Older guy, and he'd made a lot of money on the internet even before the .com boom started. And he said, "Bill," I said, "Hey, how are you?" He said, "You're always the last one here." I said, "It's got to get done, so I'm grateful to be here." He said, I want to ask you something. I got a question." I said, "Yeah." He said, "So things aren't going the way we planned. Some things are working better, and some things are working worse. What's working better is the number of people that are coming to the site. This show is really popular. We were hoping to get, I'm inventing these numbers, but something like this. We were hoping to get 30,000 views a month, but we're getting 120,000, and then we're getting 160,000. And that's great, and that's all because of you and the show." I thought, wow, thanks. He says, "Well, we're not doing so well as in the sales. We were hoping to have, I don't know, 1,200 sales a month, something like that." And he says, "We're not getting that." I said, "You're not getting 1,200? I said, "No." I said, "Well, how much are we getting?" He said, 8. So we're getting 800 sales? He says, "No, we're not getting 800 sales. We're getting 8. We got 8 sales. 8. And I thought, I know people who bought caps. I know 3 of those sales went to the staff. 8. He says, "I can't understand. I don't know what it is. You got any ideas?" And I said, "Well, to be honest with you, we sell stuff like clothes and boom boxes, but people can get those in other stores. We're not selling it for less money, and they don't get a chance to try it on. I mean, why would you buy something online if you can get it cheaper somewhere else? Hang on a second. And test it too." And this guy's eyes just went. And that's when I realized that nobody knows nothing. Ain't nobody knows nothing. This entire business was millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. Never thought it through. Just never ever thought it through. Just boom, done. Excuse me one second. I have a very fast text to my lovely wife that I have to answer. So hang on one second. Gotta go pick up my lovely Natasha. So that's the story, and there you go, and yeah, and so that's how it happened. That's how I did it, and yeah, and I never gave up on what I wanted to do, and now I'm going to go home. It's 9 o'clock. It's a 3-hour show. It's not bad. Now I'm going to go home and I'm going to do another 3-4 hours of animation and stay doing that because that's what I'm really good at. The Apollo 11, What We Saw series, and the Cold War, and America's Forgotten Heroes are like a halfway house for me. It's about halfway between doing first-person commentary, talking head commentary like I'm doing here, and then that was real storytelling, and I got to use, and there was music and sound effects and sets and all that stuff, and I was able to stretch a lot and do things I wasn't able to do. But it's still not a full toolbox. Full toolbox is directing actors and using lighting and music and costume and all the rest of it. I told my wife while I've been working on these animations on and off for several years now, but this last one recently is just really hard. And she says, "You're putting a lot of time into this and it looks really good and you're really happy." I said, "Honey, when people see what I'm really capable of, they're going to be amazed." And I said this a couple months ago. Yeah, so that's that. My wife has just finished something she was at with some friends, and she was about to take an Uber home, but she's not far away, and she just texted me, so I'm going to go get her. And so I want to wrap this baby up.
thanks to all of you for sitting and listening to all this stuff, as always. And once again, just gratitude and genuine thanks for the members that make all this possible. And this is an amazing life, and I never thought I'd ever get to this place, but here I am, thanks to you. So, means the world to me. Thanks very much, everybody, and there's a chance I may not be able to make it either next Thursday or next week because I have friends from my planetarium days are in town, and I've been looking forward to this for the longest possible time. Maybe they'll want to sit on the show, maybe he'll even be on the show, but it's kind of my older brother that I never had. And I'm looking forward to them coming to town very, very much. And Phil and Bobby, you know who you are. So if I don't see you next week, I will post a message saying no show this week, but in any event, I'll see you next time right here on your very own Stratosphere Lounge.